in extreme environments, how quickly things can unravel and how they escalate to a point of extreme danger. And the ability to recognize those at a very early stage and put in a prevention is absolutely critical to, well, in some senses, to your own survival when you're out in the wild.
I'm Jessica Smith.
And I'm Diana Denkin.
And this is Executives in the Wild, a podcast that interviews remarkable leaders and changemakers to understand why being connected to nature is so crucial to their happiness and professional success, and how it's helping them to make a positive difference in this world.
We want to showcase inspiring guests who have successfully integrated a connection to nature into their lives. We want to give our listeners a beacon of hope that there is a better way to lead in these uncertain times, one we can all lean into if only we dare to step into the wild.
So today's guest is Eoin Murray, Managing Director of the Seed Biocomplexity Index at the Crowther Lab. He joined in 2024 to bring this valuable index to wide use in the market. With over 30 years of experience as a successful business and investment leader, Yohan is proud to have launched one of the first biodiversity equity strategies with the Natural History Museum in London, and launched the UK Nature Restoration Fund, backed by the Department for the Environment in the UK. Yohan is currently studying for a PhD in nature and investment, further cultivating this commitment to business, playing a vital role in protecting biodiversity. He's based in the UK, where he is chair of the Exmoor Search and Rescue Team. Yohan has a wealth of skill and experience in technical rescue. Yohan has a postgraduate diploma in specialist rescue from Coventry University and is an active member of the Institute of Search and Technical Rescue. He also holds the First Response Emergency Care Level 4 medical qualification. When not out on the hills or in the water, Yohan is normally found in the mountains, climbing, skiing, hiking, or just exploring the world's highest volcanic peaks. He has participated in numerous adventure races around the world, from the Swedish Arctic down to the Gambia River to frozen lakes in Mongolia. Welcome, Yohan, to Executives in the Wild.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, and sorry for such a mouthful of acronyms in the biography. I feel that was a cruel start.
Well, you certainly fit the profile of the type of guest that we're looking for. So really, between your business activities and your love of nature. So we'd love to hear from you. Really, how did your love of nature start?
So I think it started as a child, and I had looking back now, what seems to me to be a very privileged upbringing, in the sense that it was an era when my parents didn't worry if I disappeared off in the morning and didn't appear back until night. I could run wild. And living in rural Scotland, about 30 miles north of Glasgow, just at the beginning of the Trossachs, where the lochs and the mountains start, I had this idyllic childhood of literally running around the mountains. So I think that's probably where that connection to nature starts.
Beautiful. It does indeed sound idyllic. And how did this love of nature evolve over time for you?
So I think it's evolved over time with an understanding that my own mental well-being relies on me being in nature. And I think recognizing that probably 10 to 15 years ago was probably, it was vital at a time in life that was maybe more challenging, and then allowed me to adopt sort of a mindfulness approach through just walking in nature, usually with my dogs, up in the hills near where I live in Devon. And it's just brought numerous benefits to me. And
Yohan, from the beginning of your career, have you always managed to integrate nature? Has it always been part of your work, or did it evolve over time that you were able to bring this theme into your work?
No, it's definitely evolved over time. I've spent 30 plus years now as a fund manager and trained as a quant. So almost the opposite of nature, a desk-bound econometrician. But I've been very privileged over the last 10 years or so to be able to bring more of nature into my work. And actually, I think my jobs in investing a lot have evolved around risk management. And the same principles apply in my interactions with nature, particularly on the mountain rescue side, where having a good sense of what is safe and reasonable to do, what assumptions one should make before proceeding. All of that actually has direct role in both work and play.
Yeah, it's great you mentioned that. I also live in the mountains and I'm learning so much about them. I mean, it's beautiful, but definitely an environment where even with the best of knowledge, you need to be humble because these are much bigger forces. I'm just wondering, Yohan, having spent that much time out in nature, in really wild, rugged terrain, have you had a moment which led to an unexpected insight or changed your perspective on life?
Yeah, I think so. I think on a couple of the races that I've been, or events that I've been lucky enough to participate in, one thing that's come across is in extreme environments, how quickly things can unravel and how they escalate to a point of extreme danger. And the ability to recognize those at a very early stage and put in a prevention is absolutely critical to, well, in some senses, to your own survival when you're out in the wild. So I think that's been a huge lesson to me when I've been out in nature.
Yeah, every year there's a lot of stories around how even experienced people who have gone ski touring disappear or don't make it back, and it's really one bad decision and a sudden change of circumstances that they cannot overcome afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the time, they can be just unlucky in turning the wrong way at the wrong time, a coincidence of circumstances, which then it escalates so quickly, and actually before you know it, you're in serious trouble.
Mm. Yeah, the issue in the mountains, though, is if the conditions are so bad, not even rescue can come at you to help you. And so that you're really out on your own. I'm wondering if you had any experience on the rescue side.
Very much so. And in rescue, we have a mantra of order of priority, and it's self, team, casualty. And you always have to keep that in mind. It is so tempting as a rescuer to put yourself at risk to go and get somebody, but actually many times all you'll really do is double up a problem that existed previously to nobody's benefit, and then you yourself become a part of that casualty situation. And so that mantra of self, team, casualty goes through everything that we do, whether it's on the water or in the mountains.
And without disclosing any private commercial information, is there any time where you had a decision to make at work where you were really actively able to draw on that mountain rescue risk calculation?
Yeah, I think a lot of the decisions that I make at work involve many of the same processes. So as a mountain leader, you are reliant on not just your own skills, but actually those of all around you. And oftentimes other people have way better ideas about how to approach a particular situation than you do. So it's very much a team sport. It is not some sort of individual heroic effort by any stretch. And of course, that feeds directly into the work environment. As a CIO, formally, most of the time, I didn't have the detail or knowledge to be able to make very, very detailed decisions, very reliant on others for their input. And before making decisions. So the direct applicability for sure.
And have you ever faced a turning point or a major decision point in your career where you were able to get out into nature to really give you perspective on what to do next?
Yeah, no, I definitely have. About a little over 10 years ago, I'd been doing some work with a high frequency trading firm. And in my head, it was a technology game. It wasn't really about investing as I knew. There was certainly very little about sustainability involved. And it really troubled me. And actually, it took a sort of complete break from that environment for 6 months just for me to rekindle my desire to stay in investing. I came very close to leaving altogether. And during that 6 months spent at home, I spent a huge amount of time up on the moors, near home, Exmoor and Dartmoor, up in the Blackdown Hills. And that's just gave me the time to rekindle that love of investing, to recenter myself around this idea of long-term sustainable growth of wealth being absolutely central for savers and investors. And over that 6 months period, slowly got back to a point where I could envisage, finishing a career in investing.
That's incredible. Dartmoor is such a special place. It's the nature is so lush there, and it's impossible not to feel the impact of it.
It definitely is, Dan. I mean, Dartmoor's an incredible place, quite a spiritual place in many ways too. Lots of Neolithic ruins and stones, clearly deliberately put in that beautiful spot for a reason. And yet we know too that Dartmoor, as beautiful as it is today and rugged, was probably even more full of nature going back in time. Temperate rainforest covered the vast majority of Dartmoor and Exmoor at one point in history. And it's wonderful to see some of the efforts today that are in place to seeing that being restored, even though it is beautiful as it is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I went there with a friend who was trained in the Amazon rainforest by shamans, but he's actually he was a corporate leader. And as we were walking in that forest, he told me that, Native Americans, when they walk in the forest, they don't look at their feet. They don't look at the next step of, oh, there's a root, I don't want to fall, or here's a stone. But they learn to feel their steps and keep your eyes level. And that way you can take in much more of the environment. So I was actually trying to practice this in Dartmoor, and I noticed how different my walk has become just from walking, upright and really trying to take in a bigger perspective and a bigger slice of the forest. Of course, you have to go slower as well if you don't want to trip off, but it's a very special place.
I love that idea. I think that's something I should try, see if it helps me get over my innate clumsiness. It sounds like we come from the same background, Diana. If there's a route, I will find it for sure. But there's something in there too about you're saying that slowing down, and actually maybe there's something in that more generally, just around allowing a greater appreciation of nature when you're traveling at a less hectic pace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this has to do with the fact that you can find your way back to your center, to your groundedness, to your purpose. And you nature can help you gain that clarity, mental clarity on what's next. Because when you slow down, you're able to feel more, you're able to take in more. And those decisions become actually easier when we're not overwhelmed or stressed. I'm also wondering right now, in your current job and endeavors, how do you balance a need for a quiet time, reflective time spent in nature with the demands of your job and career?
Sure. So again, very privileged to live out in the countryside in Devon and working from home a good deal. Part of my sort of mindfulness routine is taking the dogs for long walks, hour and a half, 2 hours, up into the Blackdown Hills. And I find that works in two particular ways. Either it's sort of, I can wrestle with a particular problem whilst out walking in nature and find the answer, or the alternative is it just gives complete clearness of mind. Again, which when you come back from that walk, you're just in a much better place to tackle some of the complex issues that you're facing in work.
And Yohan, you're a leader in this sector. You're also a leader to your team. How does the time that you spend in nature affect how you show up as a leader? I'm guessing there's an element of how to work as a team in the rescue space, but tell us more about how that shapes who you are as a leader.
So I think you probably ought to ask them, Jessica, rather than be asking me, because they would tell you the truth. Of course, I'll just give you my version of it. So I think there's something about a calmness that comes from being in nature, which filters into my leadership. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, in the sense that, knowing the limits of your own understanding, and being willing then to ask of others what you don't know, I think is a critical piece of that. So something in there that I'm not sure everybody would agree my leadership style is always calm, but I certainly try to reflect that.
That reminds me of what you said about the mountain rescue, this self, others, casualty. Actually, if you think about it, also if we're not taking care of ourselves, if we are not feeling resourced and emotionally grounded, and our cup isn't full, it's very hard to truly take care of others. If you're lacking, if you have unmet needs, if your body is aching, if you're stressed, it's much harder to put all that attention and care on others, and then let alone trying to solve the big challenges that the world has. So I'm wondering if there is a connection there. If nature allows you to resource yourself, and that way the way you show up in your team is already from that calm, grounded place.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true, Diana. And you guys know this as well as anybody. The pair of you having rushed back from New York Climate Week, I can imagine that both of you will be, recovering for the next several days. But you're right. So being out in nature, I think, allows you to, ensure that your emotional quotient remains, your barrel of that remains full. And I think that has a direct implication for how you appear, how you interact with others, how you deal with issues that rise. And so, yeah, that all comes from being able to spend time in nature.
Mm-hmm. And just before we move on to the next section, Diana, I just want to ask, how practically are you able to juggle a career in the financial space with the time that you're doing mountain rescue? So are you able to carve out certain days that you're, dedicated to finance work, and how do you manage that?
So with difficulty is the short answer, and very much reliant on the generosity of others. So that's both family and work in terms of having the time to go off and do the rescue. So yeah, we have dedicated training. Of course, as a minimum, there's 2 evenings and a full day each month. And then for the extra technical disciplines, there's additional training on top of that. So probably all in all, you're close to 4 or 5 full days a month devoted to that. And then call outs are something altogether different, and they can happen at any time, any day. And the rule is that if we're in the country and available, we stay on call the whole time. And it's that ability to be able to speak to an employer and say, look, I've had a call out. Do you mind if I disappear for the next 5-6 hours? I'll make it up, I promise. And I've been very lucky, again, privileged that I've been allowed to do that. It's important to me, and I think employers have probably recognized that. I know my family does. They know that it's something that matters to me, so they help me get out the house.
So effectively, you could be on call all the time for an emergency, and yes, it certainly seems that it's something that you would need to do, instead of a webinar or a call, to be able to say, okay, I need to put this down and go and deal with this emergency. So how often in a month? I guess it varies seasonally, but how often a month normally would you get a call out?
Yeah, so post-pandemic, we are up to about 1 a week at the moment. Okay. So 50 in the year. And that's probably grown by 50% relative to pre-pandemic. And sadly, a lot of that is around individuals with mental health issues and seeking resolution in nature in a way that's not great. And so that's been the biggest escalation, has been dealing with despondents who are in not a great place and oftentimes don't want to be found. So that makes the job even harder.
Wow. So there's mental health first aid, as well as, accident rescue. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that must be a lot to cope with, when you kind of come back to, go back into the workplace setting as well.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think, again, we're very lucky that we have access to, the blue light service, mental health, phone calls, all of their materials. And I think as a team as well, we learn very much to, look after one another, particularly when you've sort of been through an extremely stressful period, which, that too has its benefits with work. That's a discipline which can carry across to the work environment really well.
I mean, even in accident rescue, I think your service becomes so clear. So that must be quite fulfilling. I unfortunately have my own experience having been hiking in Colorado and then slipping on ice, falling off the trail and breaking my leg in two. Like, it was extremely painful, and this was in a forest which burned down, so like doom and gloom, just like black trees all over, no phone reception, and I knew that by myself I couldn't move an inch. Like, it was impossible, and it was cold, and I was just with one friend, and then, I mean, suddenly there was one bar of reception. I quickly got through 9/11, and I managed to call the rescue, and all I hear is that they confirm they are coming, and after that, nothing. So 2.5 hours just sitting there in the forest, not knowing what will happen. And, I contemplated so much, obviously, in the intense pain. And I remember when the lady showed up, like, I started to just break down and cry. I was so relieved that they managed to arrive there. And she said, I have good news and bad news. And I was like, okay, tell me. The good news is, like, 5 more men are coming with stretchers and we're going to get you out of the forest. The bad news is this path is so narrow that they cannot come up here. So you have to hop down another kilometer, which was incredibly painful. But I hopped down, and I remember on the stretcher that I was just overflown with gratitude. Like, my heart opened, tears were flowing, and I just thought, these people are literally saving my life. Even though it was an ankle fracture, there was no way I'm going to get out of that forest by myself. And I thought, if this happened 200, 300 years ago, before these forest rescues were established, I mean, most likely I would have died. I would have been eaten by an animal, or you don't know, but I couldn't find a solution by myself. So I was wondering how much this kind of perspective, how much you receive these kind of stories where people are really just grateful that you show up for them and save their lives in many ways.
Yeah, so for the most part, that's exactly right. You get extreme gratitude, and sometimes it can be from the wider family or the individual themselves, and time might have elapsed. And even the other day, I got an email just out of the blue to say it was the anniversary of a particular rescue the team had done, and this person's daughter was writing just to say, we remember it so clearly and so very grateful. And equally, I suppose the flip side is, is where we are doing a rescue for somebody that has the mental health issues, and maybe they don't want to be found. There's something really important about not passing any judgment on those individuals and just seeing them as, actually, this is just another person who needs rescue in maybe multiple forms, not just physical, and that we're just a small part of maybe helping that person get back on track.
Wow. Well, so many people must have just a very special place in their heart for you at those, really critical life or death moments. So that must feel, incredible, and, clearly very important to carve out the time to continue to be able to do that.
And so clearly you are facing situations which are life-changing for many people at the cusp of that. The future could go either this way or that way. And the fact that you show up and manage to rescue them carves a different future for them that becomes possible. Also in your work, you are working on how to bring finance to a future that is more sustainable, that is better for our planet. So I'm wondering how all of this, and together with the time that you spend in nature, together with that reflective, introspective time, Yohan, how do you think about the future? Are you filled with hope and optimism about it, or where do you stand?
So being a Highlander, I flip-flop between hope and optimism and deep despair. But I think most of the time, hope and optimism wins over in the long run. So yeah, I think, like you two, I worry greatly about our future, and sometimes can feel completely overwhelmed by the issues that I think face our planet today. So there's something about, figuring out what's the tiny little contribution that I can make that will make a difference, and being very focused around that. And I think, the way I look at these things is we have a system today which has not served us that well. So there are two things that one could do: stay inside the system and try to work with what we've got and improve it, or alternatively go outside the system and actually contemplate an alternative system altogether. And I think it's really important that both of those things happen, and that you give you give yourself space to think about how you can make these small contributions to both of those things. And I think that's sort of where I end up on this is, in my work, we need that mixture of, I'm going to work with what we've got today, but to make marginal improvements that will get us to the right place. And then, encourage those that are outside that normal system, the not investment people of this world, to think bigger picture. It's a real privilege to work with academics that in many ways have the luxury of being able to do that and conceive of a different way of doing things, the one that is more sustainable for the planet.
And when you're working with the big picture people, how do you envision a relationship between humans and nature to go in the future?
So I think one of our mistakes from the past has been to imagine that somehow humans and nature are separate, and that humans impose their will upon nature. And as you two know, that's just not the case. If anything, it's the way around. As you said earlier, Diana, that nature is an indescribably huge force, not something that we can properly shape to our will. And that comes across very much to me when we're doing water rescue. You try to fight against the water, you're onto a losing battle straight away. The key is to work out how you can work with water to perfect a rescue of somebody. So actually, I think there's something from that we need to find our role as humans within nature. Yes, we play a part, and yes, in many ways we can do interventions which help nature. But to imagine that in some way we're in total control just seems to me completely perverse. So yeah, I think once you get comfortable with that, then you're in a good place to start your journey.
Mm-hmm. Recently, I've been thinking about this phrase, the love of nature. And, as you know very well, nature can be very dangerous for us, and it's not Disneyland. But do you think, engaging in nature, spending time in the wild is important for building a more nature positive, regenerative future?
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely essential, and I would encourage everybody to do it. And for that reason, I think we need, better access to nature, more urban green spaces that allow people in large conurbations to access nature more readily. And I love this idea that, green prescriptions are becoming a thing where people are encouraged by, medical professionals that actually part of their treatment is going out to spend more time in nature. And I was at a conference in Oxford earlier this year. I think actually you might have been speaking, Jessica, where some early academic evidence to suggest that there are financial benefits that are readily describable, which come from the savings that one can make from getting people to spend more time in nature. And I think that's just amazing. It's something that I hadn't given a great deal of thought to. So yeah, what a wonderful idea.
Yes, absolutely. I need to dig in. I think it was Decathlon that presented that research, so I need to dig into to where they got that study. But it did sound that the more time you spent in nature, the higher your income went up, controlling for other factors. So that is something we need to dig into further. It sounds very interesting.
It's also interesting that the way we think of nature is different based on where you're from, right? In most of Europe, we have what we call nature is a plantation forest, and we're still happy to be in the forest. But in terms of biodiversity, it cannot be compared to the Amazon or even how Europe must have been, before the Industrial Revolution. But that said, I still think that any nature has a great potential to teach us and to lead to insights, even if you're just looking at your own little garden and the plants that grow in it. So I'm wondering, Yohan, just to close off, what is the greatest lesson that nature has taught you?
So I think it comes back to something that we've touched upon a couple of times, and it's about respect. It's about the respect for the wild, recognizing that in all of its beauty, as we've said, it can be at times extremely dangerous. So, I take that as, when you're out in nature, it's so important to be thoughtful and careful about what you're doing, where you're at. So keep that in mind all of the time. That for me is the number one lesson when it comes to nature.
I'm just wondering how much the unwillingness of humanity to embrace that humbleness, which would require to show respect, is driving the destruction of nature. And just the example that comes to mind is, the culling of the wolves in Europe at the moment, or other wild animals. Like, we've spent 25 years rewilding, and finally those populations have bounced back a little bit, and now there's this huge backlash driven by fear, not driven by science, that says the wolf is dangerous, we got to kill it. While actually peaceful coexistence is not only possible, but it is better for the lands, it is better for nature, and also there's so much that people can learn about it. It's rarely a real threat to human life. And so I'm wondering, what do you think would help more people be able to move into that position of humble reverence that you're talking about?
I think you've got to go back to the beginning and start with the educational piece, because, as you say, the scientific evidence is fairly clear that we can coexist, and yet our forebears, here in the UK, wolves, bears, lynx, beavers, all extinct hundreds of years ago, and a real tragedy. And only slowly are we reintroducing them, and there's a huge amount of re-education that goes on around the impact of these animals. So far, all we've got are the beavers back. Now, that's super important when it comes to river restoration. And, we know that beavers are much better river engineers than humans will ever be. But as you say, the opposition to, say, even the reintroduction of lynx, safe in the knowledge that in Scotland in particular, there's this huge overpopulation of deer, and we have a huge problem that is actually counter to improving our biodiversity. So actually letting nature take more of its course in the form of having these wilder animals back in our lives, in our nature, is an essential piece to our own future. And I think starting with education has to be so something to teach our kids, and in my case the grandkids. That's what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a lot of my work has been in Southern Africa, where people live alongside, what we would consider dangerous wildlife. And, I've slept out just with a bedroll and open air alongside elephants, just, pitter-pattering around me. And, I don't think people realize that we can actually have these peaceful coexistence with nature if we're prepared. And, this is very common outside of Europe and the Western world.
Yeah, no, shared a very similar experience, Jessica, this summer in Botswana, while camping and canoeing, which allows you to get so much closer to the animals, and there's a healthy coexistence there that we can all aim for.
Absolutely. Great. Well, Yohan, we have 4 quick questions that we like to end every single interview with. So hopefully these aren't too challenging questions at this point. But could you tell us, what is your favorite place in nature?
Can I go with 2? Is that cheating? I'm going to go with 2.
Go ahead.
So just above the house at home is a place called Colmstock Beacon in the Blackdown Hills, and from there on a good day I can get a clear view of Dartmoor and out across to Exmoor, and the other way I can get a view of the Quantock Hills. That is a place of real beauty and spirituality to me. The other favorite place that I'm going to go for is a little island off the west coast of Scotland called Iona, where my mum was born. And again, it's the introduction of Christianity from Ireland to the UK came through Iona, and it's an incredible place. Remote, beautiful beaches, clear white sand, turquoise seas. Apart from the temperature of the water, you could also almost be in the Caribbean. But it's a very evocative place.
Oh, we should visit. And what's one place in nature that you haven't visited yet but would really love to?
So I've got one in the planning, which I'm very excited about. So COP16 in Cali, Colombia, at the back end of next month. I know I'll see you both there. After that, we as a family are going to hop down to Ecuador to the south and climb Mount Chimborazo. And that for me is a big one. One, because it's following in the trail of the great naturalist Alexander von Humboldt, who the whole idea of Naturgemalde, this interconnectivity of nature, came to him as he journeyed through Colombia and into Ecuador and up the slopes of Chimborazo. And the second important piece for this particular mountain is it's not the highest in the world, 6,300 odd, but it is measured from the center of the planet. It is the highest place on Earth, or if you prefer, the closest place to the sun, because of that bulge around the middle of the globe.
Beautiful! Wow. Well,
6,000.
I can't wait to follow along.
You're welcome to come, Jessica.
Oh, thank you. I meant follow along virtually, but I would love to join. Do you have a favorite piece of art, a book, poetry, or film that connects you to nature?
Oh gosh, I mean, I could go with any of the Sir David Attenborough documentaries. Are all wonderful and timepieces that you can go back and watch over and over, and I never get bored of that. But I would say that one book which really caused me to properly rethink my own relationship with nature is Eat Like a Fish by Bren Smith. And it documents his life. He started out as a fisherman on some of the bigger trawlers in northeast Canada, and when they ran out of fish there, he and his friends, they went to northwest Canada, fished those to extinction as well. And then it dawns on him that we're destroying the planet in our own sort of pursuit of greed. And overnight, Bren had this revelation that he should approach things in a very different way. And now he's formed a charity that encourages others to look at mariculture as a sustainable activity, growing seaweed or mollusks or oysters, whatever it is. And it's a real transformational journey. And it was such a powerful story when I first read that book. That's one that sticks with me.
Especially when someone who has been on the other side brings that perspective. That's pretty powerful. We're sure reading it. And Yohan, what is one thing you would recommend to our listeners who want to better connect to nature?
again, this is me being a Libran, by the way, because I keep coming out with 2 answers to every single question that you give. So it's the ultimate in cheating. So it's just me being an indecisive Libran. So apologies for that. But 2 things. One would be, if at all possible, and I recognize that it's not always available for everyone, is to, allow yourself the time to spend more time in nature. And the other one is something for my work and for my profession, is to, ask the person that is managing your pension fund, because we pretty much all have pension funds. What are you doing about nature? Just take the 30 seconds to ask them that question. And, maybe that makes a tiny little bit of difference to them, but I would encourage everybody to do it.
Absolutely. I think most people don't define themselves as an investor, but more or less, if you have some wage employment, hopefully you're investing a pension somehow. So we do all have a voice in the investment world now.
Thank you so much, Yohan. This was wonderful speaking to you.
Thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was honestly very unexpected interview with Yohan. What did you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, I moved into the mountains, into the heart of the Alps just less than 2 years ago, and I've been learning so much about mountains and the forces of nature. I've also done mountain safety training, so I have huge respect and admiration for people who do the rescue work. It's such an immense undertaking, and you can really tell that it's been shaping who he is as a person and how he shows up to the world, to the people around him.
Mm-hmm. So I did know beforehand that he does this mountain rescue work, but somehow I imagined it a bit more segmented. But the fact that he's effectively on call all the time, and he juggles that on top of, being a leader in nature finance, having a very senior role, also doing a PhD. It's incredible. So I felt like there was a lot to learn and take away from.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it really shines through Yohan, all this time that he spends in nature and in the wilderness. I just loved also what he said about respect and reverence for nature. That I think is really key. Like, if we wanted to shift how we are thinking of nature and move away from this extractivist mindset, which is rooted in the idea that nature is something to extract and dominate and control, we gotta find our way back to that point of reverence, that point of respect. And he demonstrated this so beautifully with his stories.
I think just his experiences in rescue were so powerful to me. I think I had thought more about rescuing people in terms of a physical accident, like, tripping or slipping in the mountain, but also the number that he said and the relevance of COVID, how so many people post-COVID need a mental health rescue as well, and how we are getting more and more prescriptions for nature. That really resonated a lot. Yeah,
that did. I don't know. Somehow I think it should be something that we take as, vitamin nature.
Yes.
A daily dose that is needed.
Well, thank you so much for being with us on this episode of Executives in the Wild.
Executives in the Wild is created by Diana Denke, Jessica Smith, and Robin Agustin. Those involved in the podcast are doing so in a personal capacity, and views expressed are not necessarily associated with their employers. You can follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Executives in the Wild, or go to executivesinthewild.com, where you can sign up to be a part of our community. Please support us by subscribing and sharing this podcast, available on YouTube and most outlets including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you soon.